none of what I am warning is racist, Islamophobic, etc., etc., etc. There is a clear difference between Muslim and political Islam. Islamism, it is a threat that is spreading, and the people pushing it are already halfway through their plan to take over this country and all of the world.
What's the difference between Islam and Islamism? Take a look at this clip over here with Glenn Beck talking about this exact topic. So we'll watch it together and then talk about it. But first, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Check this out.
Hello, America. I want to talk to you about some spooky stuff. The ramifications of the invasion of Islamism. Islamism is not Islam. It's political Islam. And it's in our country, and it has not been truly realized yet. We are facing an existential threat, and the signs are slowly being realized. But if you think about what people were talking about 6 or 8 months ago, nobody was talking about political Islam. They were not talking about this. All of a sudden, it seems to be everywhere. It's picking up speed, not just here, but all over the world. I've told you for months now, we are actually in World War III. We are fighting the biggest, most dangerous foe we have fought since our first foreign war with the Barbary pirates, Islamism. We are fighting political Islam. You just haven't recognized it yet. They have. And it is the Third World War, possibly the war to end all wars. I'll fully explain this here after the break. But it has infiltrated our cities, universities, NGOs, the justice system, left-wing protest movement, even the halls of Congress. The rate at which all of this is happening might be outpacing Europe at this point. I have somebody who is the chief of staff of Lord Pearson. He's in the British House of Lords. He was just recently in Texas. He wrote several articles on what he witnessed. And he was like, wait a minute, I've seen this in the UK. I did not expect this while I was visiting Texas. Texas, wake up. America, wake up. He'll join me later on in the program to discuss all of this in depth. He wrote an article about the Islamic tribunals, Sharia courts in Dallas, Texas. And as of last year, these tribunals decided around 300 cases. Now, the mosques all say these courts are voluntary. Are they really? How many women, children, and others have these courts hand down rulings? How many of them have any say in the entire process? By the way, if you're divorced in one of these courts, you're not really married, because if you were married with one of these courts, you're not really married in Texas. So do you have Texas law actually helping? You know, how many of them are afforded a licensed lawyer to speak on their behalf in these courts? The author of this article noted how what's spreading in the U.S. began back as far as the early 1980s in the U.K. The British permitted its first Sharia council as a gesture of multicultural respect. Today, that number has grown to about 85 Sharia councils. They handle hundreds of cases every year. And I'm sure this is probably consistent with all of Europe. The consequences, the ones that follow, zero accountability, are all suffered by the masses. The Christmas season is now upon us, and with this time of year comes an all too familiar tone in places like the UK, Germany, and all over Europe. Christmas markets are now being canceled. Not a lot of information is ever given as to why, but there is this article that lays it out pretty clearly. Terror protection is too expensive. There's one city in Germany that it's for hundreds of years it's had a Christmas market. It now has a mosque right by the Christmas market, and they said it would cost the city more to protect the Christmas market than to run the Christmas market. So they canceled it. That's unacceptable. Christians, the Christmas market, they're going on if they can afford the security bill. Well, they'll get scenes like this one in Brussels. Merry Christmas. Don't get too comfortable If that scene in Brussels looks familiar to you, it's probably because you've walked down a street in Philadelphia. Now, I want to be clear that none of what I am warning is racist, Islamophobic, etc., etc., etc. There is a clear difference between Muslim and political Islam. Islamism, it is a threat that is spreading, and the people pushing it are already halfway through their plan to take over this country and all of the world. You know, part of my job is to not just tell you what's going on today, what it means for tomorrow, but look over the horizon on what is coming, but also to help you make an argument with people who don't watch this show or don't think like you. And so I want to remind you, because this is something you must make when you're making points and talking about this, you must make the distinction between being a follower of Islam and a follower of political Islam, an Islamist. Islamism there's two different kinds, okay? A Muslim, obvious. They adhere to a religion of Islam. They make about 2 billion people in the world. However, it's not extreme. It's political. An Islamist uses Islam to force political or civilizational change, okay? Out of the total global Muslim population, it's been estimated that 10 to 15% are Islamists, but they rule the world because they have an iron fist. That means there's somewhere between 200 and 300 million global political Islamists. That's on the high end. That's a population, equivalent almost to the entire United States. Now let's go a bit deeper because this is critical to understand. There are two types of Islamists. And to understand it, let's use Marxism as an example. There are two kinds of Marxists, and this is pretty crazy how similar this is. The first group, they're the revolutionaries. They want a violent class struggle. Workers of the world unite, and they are willing to kill people to make this happen. With Marxism, there's a second group, the Fabian socialists, the progressives here in America, the cultural Marxists. They don't want the violence. They prefer a less violent or nonviolent gradual struggle. We'll get there eventually. They make small but significant gains bit by bit until eventually you have the fundamental transformation of a country. But you get to a point even there where it's violent. It's short, but it's violent at the very end, okay? Those people use the system against itself. They don't blow it up, but the ultimate goal is exactly the same. It's just two different methods, okay? This is how Islamists operate. The first group are the jihadists. They force violent change through terror, bombings, beheadings, all of that stuff. Any nightmare scenario you can think of, that's the way they do it. But the second group, they work like progressives. They work like the Fabian socialists. They use the established system and they operate inside the justice system, inside the education system, and all other legal apparatus, and they slowly change everything from the inside out. This is what's been happening to Europe and now here at home. And the Muslim Brotherhood has been one of the main facilitators of this plan. Now, there was a report that was released just a couple of weeks ago. It stated, quote, the Muslim Brotherhood's infiltration plan is an operation that is marked as having a 100-year completion date. Now, as per their calculations, they have already completed 50 years of that plan. The stated goal is to, quote, transform Western society from within. And they have been, quote, covertly embedding its allies and its ideology on college campuses and other mainstays of American life. This is the Muslim Brotherhood's stated goal. Why are they allowed to operate inside of the United States? Why do we tolerate this? Well, because of the invented Islamophobia, and that shuts people up for a time. And then things get so bad and they're like, you know what? I don't think I should shut up anymore. Something's happening. And it gets worse and worse and worse unless good people stand up in the right way. Now, the good news is that finally there are a few elected officials that are beginning to take action. Last month, Texas Governor Greg Abbott labeled the Muslim Brotherhood, as well as CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, as foreign terrorist and transnational criminal organizations. Now, if the state of Texas, is a big if it gives this teeth, it could mean that these organizations can no longer acquire land in Texas, and the Attorney General would now be unleashed to try and shut them down. But why the addition of CARE? Well, CARE, one of the main groups the media cites as experts on Islamophobia, and they shut down anything that they can get their hands on, and that is critical. But their connection to the Muslim Brotherhood goes even further, and the details give you a rare glimpse inside the Islamist civilization Jihad. It's a little peek behind the curtain. It goes all the way back to the early 1990s. In 1993, the FBI wiretapped a secret Muslim Brotherhood meeting in Philadelphia, and it uncovered this plot, and we've talked about it a million times on this broadcast, but it uncovered this plot that their U.S.-based organizations were being used to fund Hamas with millions of dollars to wage war on Israel. The entire meeting was on how to deceive the American people. One high-ranking member said, quote, "I swear by Allah that war is deception. Deceive your enemy." That would be us. They stress the importance to, quote, "influence Congress and infiltrate the American media outlets, universities, and research centers," end quote. Now, if it wasn't that our whole lives were at stake, I'd say that's pretty interesting. It's a little bit more than that. These are all of the American institutions right now that always seem to defend Hamas and demonize Israel. Now, keep in mind, the entire purpose of this meeting was to facilitate jihad through Hamas against Israel and with American donation dollars. One of the attendees of this secret meeting was a public relations director named Nihad Awad. He was never indicted. In fact, Awad became the national executive director of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, who authorities actually believed was under the radar, a new front organization that had no evident ties to Hamas. Now, here's a photo of Awad with Linda Sarsour. There they are. Sarsour was instrumental in Mamdani's election in New York City. And the location of this photo? How good are you at recognizing white walls? That's the Hall of Congress. Infiltration? Yeah, I think so. Complete. But look at what's happening in New York City. Mamdani. Is anybody really talking about this? Is anybody actually saying, hey, you know what? I think what he's saying to the Muslim community, he actually means. And when he's talking to, the dopes like me, he doesn't mean that stuff. When he's like, no, that's just talk. Now, maybe there's some light at the end of this dark tunnel. The Trump administration just followed Governor Abbott's lead and began to process and designate certain Muslim Brotherhood chapters as foreign terrorist organizations. This couldn't happen fast enough. The things that we have seen, how things are being played out, this slow, methodical, civilizational jihad, this transformation is continuing to this day. And by their own calculations, it will be complete in 50 years. I don't think it's going to take them 50 years. And we better wake up. Last night, I had a conversation with somebody from England, and we were talking about this. And he said, Glenn, do you know that, Ireland doesn't really exist anymore. Ireland, as you know it, is over. It's Islamic. It's everywhere. You have to go out to the outskirts in Ireland to find the Irish culture anymore. And I said, what is going to happen? How is the UK going to survive? And he said, well, I'm not sure it does. I think it could go into civil war. And we're seeing signs of that now in places like Ireland. Have you seen the guys in the ski masks that are white Irish? And they're talking about bombing and everything else that we thought was gone back in the 80s. It's back because now the politicians are not listening to the Irish people, and the Irish people have their back against the wall. When that happens, we're in real trouble.
You know, there's a lot of confusion about Islam versus Islamism, and that confusion leads to fear and division, sometimes even hatred. So let's break it down. Islam is a religion that's followed by over 1 billion people. It's prayer, it's fasting, it's charity, it's family, many of the same moral building blocks that build other faiths. But Islamism is a political ideology that hijacks Islam to justify power, to terror, justify domination. Think of it like this. If Islam is a car, Islamism is someone stealing that car and driving it through a crowd. The car isn't the problem, it's the driver. Terrorists aren't the mainstream. They're a radical minority that weaponizes faith for political goals. And even though a small minority in the Muslim world is still, so 2 billion people, even 10% of that is 200 million people, which is a lot of people, to blame all Muslims for terrorism is like blaming every Christian for the Crusades. Fear of innocent Muslims, Islamophobia, is destructive and unfair, but refusing to confront Islamist extremism, terrorism, is dangerous and naive. We need clarity, not confusion. The uplifting part is that the Muslim world has millions of decent people who want peace, who want freedom, who want opportunity, and they're often the first victims of Islamist terror. Our job isn't to reject Muslims. Our job is to unite with peaceful voices against the extremists who hijack faith. If someone poisons a well, you don't ban water, you clean the well. Faith is the water, extremism is the poison. If we stand together, we clean the well. That is hope, that is humanity, and that's the future. And if you like this content overall, hit that subscribe button over there in the corner. We'd love to stay in touch. Take care.